delighted to be joined today by Mike Bohndiek, CEO of PTI Digital. Mike, I know you've had a busy few days at Edgbaston over the weekend, and obviously PTI is the technology partner for them. So perhaps you can just tell us a bit about, what happened with the pilot event at Edgbaston there, and basically what work PTI Digital had to do to get that event up and running.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been working with Edgbaston Stadium for about 2.5 years now, primarily on the strategic side, looking across the technology, data, and digital landscapes. So that could be anything from the working involving around the mobile app. What are we doing with it? How is it going to be executed? What does that mean operationally? Right the way back into deep dive technology, core networking, switching, routing, fiber, Wi-Fi, connectivity, and sort of anything in between. So I guess in very loose terms, anything that plugs in or anything a consumer touches that sort of has a screen or a touch point in that journey sits under the umbrella of sort of PTI's remit in that engagement. And of course, with the EPR pilot events at Edgbaston, where approximately 70% density, so 18,000 people a day, with no social distancing, and it almost being sort of a 2019 style event, as if COVID had almost never happened as a piece, and with 15 days notice to get to that stage. Clearly, quite a lot of moving parts. First thing to say is the team at Edgbaston are exceptional, and the operational delivery from their side and the willingness to keep working and get things done was a huge part of the success. And equally, their strategic vision from 2019, when we first engaged with them, and how they wanted to move the ground on and the consumer experience on using technology, put them in an ideal position to be able to capitalize and run an event like this at short notice, because a lot of the groundwork had been laid. So across 2019, they invested into an app and into a new till system, and they went cashless. In 2020, whilst the stadium was closed, we took advantage of that from a PTI point of view, and refreshed a lot of the technology and ripped the commons rooms apart and refreshed everything that was going on into there, so that we had our classic pyramid of technology set in place, from the data layer right at the top, down into the applications, out into the technology infrastructure, and out into the connectivity. I guess in terms of the pilot event itself, our role was essentially to curate, orchestrate, and operationalize all technology, data, digital touch points. So obviously one of those pieces, I guess, as a big piece, was in order for people to attend what was technically a scientific experiment, they need to have consent forms signed. So we built a user journey there through the mobile app for people to be able to go through, and in order to see their ticket, have to complete the consent form and be able to work in that way, through to how are we going to keep queues down, how are we going to maximise the opportunity in the stadium, how are we going to make it safe, albeit a 2019 non-socially distanced event, but how do we make it safe in the new age regardless of that, down to even things like ingress points needing to show a lateral flow test, and the stewarding flow, the ticketing and the ingress flow, and needing to get connectivity to new areas of the ground that wouldn't otherwise have been used in those capabilities. So a very wide-ranging remit, all at quite short notice, but a very successful event, and obviously most importantly, a major step forward for the industry as we come back out of lockdown and COVID restrictions.
Exactly. And, sort of taking it now, you're a few days sort of post the event at Edgbaston. Have you had chance to look at, what key learnings or takeaways, came out of that event?
Yeah, I guess the key learnings out of that event are what most people would have predicted, really, in that we as PTI, as have numerous other sort of industry folk, have been pointing to the wider world digital adoption that has taken place over the course of the COVID lockdown period, i.e. whilst fans have been away and consumers haven't been in our stadiums, what have they been doing and what have they learned and how are they behaving? And naturally, when you go down a process, for example, with digital ticketing, and the primary process flow is to push people into an app, and you have the demographic of test match cricket attendees, there was a natural kind of lag concern. Will everyone have a smart device? How will we cope with those pieces? But actually, we issued 48,750 digital tickets across the first 3 days, which was the primary days based on how the event played out. And what that helps us to reflect is that the wider world is awake to that digital adoption. People are now used to logging into a Tesco Club Card app before they go into the supermarkets. They are used to using that to book the train and be able to access other details and to do things, because of course throughout the last 12 to 15 months, people have had to reduce contact points. We've had to capture more data. You've had to use an NHS track and trace app, even if you're just going for a coffee in a local restaurant. And so people were much more willing to put that piece together. And I guess that's reflected in the stats coming out of the event. The tickets, as I've already mentioned, we had over 5,000 food and beverage orders placed through the app, either on click and collect or to seat delivery, or for ASAP, just get me ahead of the queue. Can I queue bus, please? We had a 280% uplift in the number of users on the app over the course of June. So essentially the pre-event and then in the event as that area. And through the use of all of those technologies, we were able to reduce things like wait times in bars, wait times for toilets, and wider items. So really what we feel, and certainly the folk at Edgbaston decided to feel, was this is almost the blueprint. This is now the expectation for consumers. We need to be able to offer those digital pieces that previously might have been a concern in terms of how do we deliver them, that might have been a question in terms of how well they'll be adopted as a piece. The use case has almost proved that for what is typically elder age group or elder adult population age group event, that the propensity to use digital tools for anything from ingress for ticketing to engagement and understanding of the spectator guides, through to understanding the wait times, through to understanding the purchase for click and collect food and beverage, they're ready to adopt. And now it's about building from there.
And obviously, sort of throughout COVID, PTI has actually been definitely hugely on the ascent, in actual fact. You've is it now the Middle East, Australasia, you sort of now represented almost, I'd say, globally at this stage. So how's that whole growing of the business? And, when it comes to clients in different regions, are there nuances, or, when it comes to technology, do you know something that works in Europe will work in the Middle East, will work in Australia, or, how are you bringing that all together?
Yeah, so it's been a fast-paced growth year. Perhaps unexpectedly in some respects, given how the sports and entertainment industry has been hit, and given that's the only industry in which we work as specialists. But what it has also done is sort of pose that question to rights holders, clubs, venues, of sort of, if not now, when? How are we going to bounce back from this? What does that mean for our commercial models? How are we best leveraging data? What technology tools are we going to require to reopen our buildings safely? And a whole variety of questions in between. And that's sort of driven inbound inquiry from a variety of places, and allowed us to sort of scale off of the back of the plans that we already had for the ANZ market, but to accelerate the pieces in the Middle East. I think the two fundamental differences in any sort of region from a business point of view are the operating models and the cultural side as an element of that. So if you take Australia, the default offering there is that the government own the stadium. An operator then runs the stadium, and the clubs and venues are tenants within the stadium, whereas I guess compared to the UK, it's typically a club-owned, club-operated model by default, with very few sort of exceptions or outliers. When it comes to the Middle East, the technology expectations are far heightened, and a number of the major players, Microsoft, Cisco's, and a variety of others, are running innovation labs live in a number of the sports and entertainment complexes, and using those as a catalyst to sort of prove the point, prove the concept, to then take to the wider world. So naturally, the innovation curve in the Middle East is far higher than it is in Australia or indeed in the UK. And so what it's about from our point of view in that side is finding the right stakeholders but ultimately continuing the common theme, which is what challenge are we solving? One of our big points with clients in the UK is often that are you innovating because you truly want to innovate, or are you doing it because you've got it as a mission statement goal? So what are you trying to get out of innovation? You've got the what. If we want an app, that's the answer. What's the question? So what's the why of the reason you want to innovate in this space? What's the reason? What's the strategy behind it as a piece? And that's common globally. It's about stopping people spending on tech that they don't need and prioritizing roadmaps in a way that will bring the biggest consumer benefits and the biggest commercial benefits back into those rights holders.
And obviously, over the last 18 months, without doubt, we've seen a huge pickup in technology. I know many people say it's almost like we fast forwarded 10 years.
Yeah.
But, as we start to reopen and start to get back to normal, do you think, there is no going back? So, what is the future? What sort of trends are you seeing? What are the sort of must-haves when it comes to technology in the sports and events sector?
Yeah, I think it probably comes to a couple of concept points first, which are we buying this piece of technology, or are we procuring technology as a part of reopening as a safety orientated measure? And how long or how useful is that piece of technology going to be versus does it fit across multiple strands of the business? So a huge percentage of our clients that have been working with us through what we would call sort of digital or technology objectives. And helping the business at board level or sort of senior management level to understand why they are doing things and why, or the why of the answer. So what we tend to do is look at, let's say, 6 objectives, which might be as headline or as high level as enabling the consumer to more easily buy from us across digital platforms. But we'll have 6 of those for a client, and using a Moscow framework, we'll then say, well, if any requirement that we receive from any part of the business, whether it's a steward on the front gate or it's a CEO coming back from a conference, it goes through this process where if you've got 5 or 6 ticked, it's must have. If it's 3 or 4, it should have. If it's one or 2, it sort of falls into backlog and requirements, and to help prioritize the spend, because there's so much ability right now to really go, great, we need to invest into everything, and you need to sort of take that step back. But I think the questions we're trying to ask the industry and trying to get the answers to really are around how do we beat the consumer experience? And that used to be the piece that we talk a lot about, the experience on the sofa, and people saying, well, look, I can configure everything when I'm at home. It's really hard to configure when I'm in a stadium. And a lot of technologies are now bridging that gap and allowing people to order their food and beverage from a seat, look at live analytics, get involved in AR activations, connect to the Wi-Fi to be able to look and personalize that GA type experience. But now we've got to beat the experience that those venues who have been open for a greater period of the last 15 to 18 months have already developed. And obviously leisure, for example, has reopened far earlier. And you've got really simple things. I confess, as a Euro 2020 fan, when Domino's Pizza sent me a push notification on Sunday afternoon to say, hey, the football's about to start, why didn't you order a pizza? It was effective marketing, shall we say. But a new feature that they have delivered is enabling a group of people to all order their individual pizzas into one basket and pay for their respective pieces. And if you translate that into sport, one of the classic challenges, particularly for major events or into entertainment venues, has been there's 5 of us want to go. I'll buy the tickets and collect the money from the other 4. Now, would it be as simple as ordering a Deliveroo or a pizza? We can split that money and we can make it easier for each of the consumers. So if we as sports and entertainment venues don't start to think, how can we break down some of those barriers to people purchasing from us? Are they going to keep coming back and purchasing from us? Because we're in their wider world, in their daily, in their weekend takeaway, they get a great digital experience. So when they come to the stadium the day after, do they get as good an experience? So now you're fighting both the sofa and the often sort of lazier option, alongside the convenience that those people who are serving the sofa and serving those wider events are actually giving to the consumer, who is ultimately your fan, your customer, who emotively care about you as a sports club, but are they going to keep caring when the world around them is changing at a faster rate than us as an industry?
Perfect. It sounds like you're definitely keeping busy, taking over the world one country at a time. And so keep us posted, on what you're doing. And we'll hopefully see you in person in the not too distant.
Absolutely. Thanks, Katie. Appreciate the time.